Thinking about going on an extended hike, backpacking trip, or other off-grid activity? Then you need Silent Pocket's waterproof and signal-proof dry bag that will protect your electronic devices not only from the elements, but any wireless threat to your privacy as well. These bags are super lightweight, packable, and durable 420D nylon ripstop that will roll down to a compact size as well. Pick up one for yourself at silentpocket.com and make sure you use discount code Shared Security to take 15% off your order at checkout.
You're probably aware that social engineering attacks like the recent high-profile account takeovers on Twitter are costing businesses millions of dollars in direct financial losses, lost productivity, and business disruption. But what can you do about it? Well, it starts with making sure your staff are aware of how they can be targeted and exploited. That's why we're excited to announce ClickArmor's new gamified social engineering module called Fakes and Frauds. Unlike traditional training, where employees watch the same video every year and they really don't learn much, ClickArmor's game-based training offers learning quizzes, puzzles, and fun exercises that really grab people's attention and get them thinking about real-life threats that they will face in the future. Gamified learning that is visually dynamic and animated is proving to be 80% more engaging. So employees are therefore more motivated to learn defensive skills. When you can show that employees are actually learning, you get a much better return on security awareness training investment. So visit us at clickarmor.ca today to access your free trial of Fakes and Frauds gamified social engineering defense course.
Welcome to episode 104 of the Shared Security Monthly Show, and this is part 2 of our series on targeted attacks, and joining me is co-host Scott Wright. Hello, Scott.
Hello, Tom. Hello, everybody.
Hello. And as well, joining me as well is frequent guest Kevin Johnson, CEO of Secure Ideas. Hello, Kevin. And we're hello. And we're also joined by Nathan Sweaney, Senior Security Consultant, also from Secure Ideas. And welcome to the show, Nathan.
Hi, Tom. Thanks.
Awesome. So I think all of our audience really wants to know, what's it like working with Kevin?
Oh, God. It's awful.
The migraine just got worse.
Yeah. Can you mute him for a second? Oh, man. No, I always tell people I've been very fortunate. I give him a lot of crap, but I've always had the opportunity to pick the people I want to work for, not necessarily the company. And Security is a pretty good place. He'll tell you he has mistakenly fallen into success pretty well. I don't know how he does it. He's a horrible manager. I honestly, what was it yesterday? I figured out he gave me a raise in April, and he never actually gave me the raise. Like, I noticed, I'm like, wait a minute, I'm not making as much as I should be.
I was just going to point out that you were so bad as an employee, you didn't notice since April.
Fair enough.
Well, at least he's paying you. That's good.
Well, that's true. Yeah. The first 3 years, I didn't get anything. I was an unpaid intern.
Wow. Oh, wow. Well, thank you for those insights.
I will also add to shame myself. Nathan will tell you quite often, Nathan is out in Oklahoma, so he's not in the office, right? And Nathan will tell you it is not uncommon for him to find out about changes to the company, like new employees or new services, because I've announced them on Facebook. So
yeah, when Kevin left Sands, I found out about it on Facebook. And then I found out we were opening an office in Jacksonville. Like, we were all working from home. I found out we were opening an office because he announced it on Facebook.
So I'm still upset. We hired a guy that Nathan recommended. It was a guy Nathan had worked with, and we hired him. And Nathan and I were on site at a client when I got the acceptance of the offer letter. And I'm still very, very disappointed that I did not just log into Facebook from the client location, post that we had hired a new person when I was sitting across the table from Nathan. But
Does this answer your question of what it's like to work with him?
Very clearly, yes. I have a great idea now.
Awful. It's horrible.
Oh, well, thank you again for that insight on Kevin and his management style. It's so good to know. So Scott, let's talk about part 2 here of our targeted attack series. And before we get into that, if you've missed part 1 was focused all on reconnaissance. So we were joined by Kyle Lovett, a pen tester on my team at Veracode, who talked about some of the open source intelligence techniques that attackers use, to get information on who they're going to attack and get that
scanning
information.
GitHub and
all that
cool stuff.
Yep. And then bringing that really to our next phase, which is actually the approach and setting up the attack.
Yeah, so that'll be lots of fun to hear from you guys on. I think we really want to sort of put things in perspective in terms of the timelines of how attackers work. How long did they spend doing research? What do they do to prepare? I mean, you go back to the Twitter breach in mid-July, right? And there were people posting like, how did these teenagers social engineer Twitter in 2 hours of, well, it didn't take them 2 hours. It took them a little longer.
I think the fact that people ask, how did they accomplish that, is the perfect sign of how they accomplished it. Right?
It's a clue.
Yeah. That people are, and I know that Nathan is gonna talk about all this kind of stuff, but I want to be very clear. We're going to talk about things, and people are going to take away from that we think users are stupid, and I want to be very, very clear that they are, but we're all users. And the second part is the most important part there, right? Is we're all users, and we are stupid, but that's not why the problem exists. The problem exists because we've built systems, and I've talked about this before. Tom and I have had many a conversation about this. We build systems that make people used to falling for scams, right?
Yep.
Every system we use requires you to click a link somewhere in an email, and then we tell people not to click links in an email.
Not only that, but it's during every legitimate registration process when it says, when you see the button that asks cancel or okay, you got to click okay.
So we build these systems this way, and that's, I just want to, because I've talked to people before, and they're all like, oh, we blame users. We do blame users, and we shouldn't blame users, because the reality is human nature is going to always be this way, and we as security people and technologists, and it's our fault that people fall for this crap.
Well, I think the key point that it's always going to be this way, this is not a new thing. Social engineering is not a new thing. We think about phishing and we think about the technological aspects of it, but everybody knows what a con man is, right? They've been around for thousands of years. And a lot of people don't realize con man stands for confidence man. It's a scam where somebody gains your confidence in some way. And it's the exact same way with phishing and with social engineering. We use things like urgency. We generate emotion. We take advantage of familiarity. It doesn't matter how you engineer the system. Yeah. These are flaws in human psychology. And that's always going to be there.
And there's always going to be that line between the technology and the people, at least until we get everything automated and we can all be poets and philosophers, I guess is the way it goes. But
could be. Wait, you're not?
I mean, Nathan even has a banjo to go along with his poetry.
But I mean, when people have decisions to make, even if they have the authorization or the access to do it, technology is not going to know whether their intent is right or not, and so that's I think where we want people to understand that the social engineering is not about whether people are smart or not. We're all stupid about different things. So
So and the difference there is 20, 30, 40 years ago, you had to worry about the people that were in your immediate vicinity. Right now, you are open to attack from people all over the world, and so the vast number of additional attacks, the potential for attacks is just so much greater that the change in our psychology and the way that we understand risk, the way that we determine how risky is something, we haven't adjusted to that. People don't really, they still have that mindset of, oh, that'll never happen to me, right? That doesn't happen. But statistically it does. We know it does. We can train them. They still don't think it will.
And humans automatically have a bad way to judge risk. I mean, how many people are afraid of sharks, right? I tell the story all the time of me teaching a class in the middle of Idaho, and I had the people in the room raise their hand if they were actively afraid of sharks. Not just, man, sharks are scary, but man, that's something I have nightmares. And a whole bunch of people raised their hand, and I then pointed out that not a single one of them lived near an ocean, right? And I asked how many of them were afraid of cows, and nobody raised their hand, yet more people in Idaho are killed by cows than by sharks.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah.
Is that called heart disease?
Man, but I'm eating my beef. So yeah,
So-
you just don't judge risk well.
Yeah.
I often talk about my father-in-law before he died. Great man, loved him to death, awesome person, and he clicked every phishing email he got. Right, and he and I would talk regularly as I was reformatting his hard drive and reloading his operating system. That yes, there is the absolute possibility that one of those "you won the lottery" emails would be true, but it wasn't a very big possibility. That was his argument. Like, how do you know that one isn't true? And I'm like,
Yeah, exactly.
You're never gonna get. Well, I could. I can't argue with that.
Yeah. I just want to pick up on one thing that Nathan said, which I think is pretty cool, because ironically, what I use a lot of the times is the analogy of the Wild West, right? And it's not that things are so archaic; it's that there is lawlessness everywhere, right? I mean, the people who are attacking you can't really be caught, and it's kind of similar risks that they've got to learn to manage their own risks better.
Yep.
Yeah, so let's kind of go into social engineering a bit, because that's really the essence of what we're talking about when it's formulating a phishing email or a targeted attack, right? So maybe Nathan, talk a little bit about that and how maybe you use some social engineering techniques, and when you're doing your pen tests, how do you formulate that the script, if you will?
Yeah. So the first thing is always to think about what's your goal. I always like goal oriented. Anything really, but especially when it comes to testing, like what are we trying to do? We can just throw out a bunch of attacks and see what happens, throw the spaghetti against the wall and see if it sticks. But what are you trying to get? And I think it's the same thing for actual attackers, right? We're simulating real world attacks. And so there's a lot of different types of things that somebody might be trying to get the victim to do. Traditionally it was, here's a file, open this file and execute it. That's harder now. I mean, all of the different techniques and stuff we use, there are lots of controls in place, but downloading and executing a file is still sometimes a valid attack method. Sometimes you can't just send an executable anymore. Maybe you have to send an Excel file and trick them into running a macro, or something like that. Sometimes I just want them to click a link to a malicious site, right? Now, as a simulator, as a pen tester, I don't have 0 day that I can throw at every pen test and know that, okay, I'm going to send them over here and they're going to open this in their browser and boom, I'm going to compromise Chrome because of it. But if an actual bad guy might, they may have a 0 day and say, hey, I'm going to send out this phish to 10 million users. And if they click that link, boom, I win. So that might be, one method. Sometimes getting them to provide credentials, getting them to, send them. And we use that a lot for a pen test. When you're doing social engineering training, awareness training and whatnot, getting some metric that this many people click the link, like that's okay. I get it. That's important. This many people open the file, maybe, but if I can get your actual credentials, that's usually a big win for me that I can go. And there's there's all kinds of other examples. One of my favorite one time was using cross-site scripting within an email that attacked a cross-site scripting vulnerability in an internal portal. So like the only way to exploit that was an email coming in that then launched and went against the company's internal portal that, we're able to do stuff with. So there's different types of things there. But the goal is, the attacker's trying to get you to do something. And so that's the first thing is like, okay, what types of things are they trying to get you to do? And then, where are they going to go from there?
Yeah. And in a targeted attack scenario, it's really going to be about, taking the information you gathered in that reconnaissance phase and then customizing that to that particular individual, right? Like I think the last show we talked about, the CEO or the C-level executive that's going to be targeted. You might go through LinkedIn, harvest information, might look at their social media, grab something that's personal about them. And we've seen all kinds of attacks. It could be an email from your spouse, or make it look like come from someone that about, or one of your friends. Those are also popular ways of social engineering.
I got a quick question for you, Nathan. In terms of the process for doing an exploit or putting together an exploit, if you're doing reconnaissance and you want to find out, what software, what browser versions or whatever, might be exploitable that the customer or the target is using. Would you prefer to do that by luring them to a page where you can, look at their agent information, or would you prefer to call them and ask them what they actually use?
That's a great question. I hate calling. Nobody likes making those phone calls. There's like a small subset of people, and I
call Rachel or somebody, right?
Yeah. I mean, that small subset of people that like making those, vishing calls, they're psychopaths or something, right? Something's wrong with there, because for most of us, like we dread that. There's so much buildup in getting your the context designed and knowing what you're going to say. You get all that built up, and then you get on the call and you're just terrified they're going to ask something that you didn't prepare for. But that is a valid method. I've done that before where, I've called somebody and pretended to be, I'm a research assistant with this trade magazine that I know they would be familiar with, and we're doing a survey on security controls in member organizations, and do you have 5 minutes to answer a couple of questions? And then, what browser do you use? What password manager do you use? Or stuff like that. Like sometimes, most people, if they're well trained, they just hang up or start asking more questions. But occasionally you get that one person that's just really eager to be helpful and they provide info. But I think probably more effective and maybe a little bit more realistic is more of a multi-stage attack where, we're going to send one group of phishing emails where we just want somebody to click a link so we can gather that information about what browser are you using or whatever.
Cool.
Yeah, and I think too, a lot of actual attackers, they can pull that information from a variety of sources, right? Maybe they're botnet herders that collect a lot of information and then sell that out to somebody else.
Yeah, just buy some phishing.
Yeah. So
cool.
Awesome. So
if I may, one of the points there that Nathan said, but I want to really make it clear, is that very often the piece of information that he or I or you are going to use in that attack doesn't feel sensitive.
Yeah.
Right? Getting them to click the link so what browser they're running. People are like, oh yeah, it's my browser. Who cares? But it's a piece of information, right? The ruse of saying, hey, we want to know what controls you're using because we're doing a survey. That most people won't think it's sensitive to say that little icon at the bottom of their screen says semantic or whatever, right? That I think is a key point. We actually see that way too often with pen testers that aren't that good, that they don't understand the benefit of small pieces of data pulled together. And so we actually, in our job of reviewing pen test reports and things like that from other companies, very often we see that they miss that stuff.
And there's a lot of other places that you can gather that information. So, I think in your last episode, the gentleman, when he was talking about Reconnaissance, talked about, mining GitHub for information and stuff like that. And so, that's a great way. Sometimes there's artifacts in the code that might lead you to know which frameworks they use or, what technology stacks and stuff they use. And you say, hey, I know this particular framework sends emails that look like this. So I can create a framework there. Maybe the company put out a press release where they talked about, we're switching to this vendor for this thing. We're now using ADP for our HR stuff or whatever. And so I got to figure out what those emails look like, and then I can, use that. One of my favorite. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, what about their job ads, right?
Yeah, job ads.
We're hiring a developer that knows
this. Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of times we will combine phishing along with an existing internal pen test. So we are assuming a compromise, right? Somebody's already been compromised, one workstation, and now we're going to use that access to launch some targeted phishing attack against sysadmins or executives. And once you have access to an internal system, now you can look at their own email and see what they did. We did some work for a large government agency, one of those, not one of the intelligence companies, but a different 3-letter agency. And we got in and I can't remember what the company was, but they used some HR system. And so we sent an email out. This was like, I don't know, early November. We sent an email out from that company saying, hey, because of stuff that's coming up, we're going to have to change the time off, schedule around the holidays. If you are planning to take time off, you need to log in and make changes immediately. It's going to be locked on Friday, you have a deadline on Friday. And then we forwarded them to a link that looked a lot like the one they're used to logging into. And we sent that to all of the sysadmins. And I swear to God, we had 2 sysadmins that logged in to this third-party site with the same credentials that their domain admin password used.
Yeah.
The large government, I had to sit across from the administrator. This was right after OPM. And he said, what is the chance that we could be like OPM? Like, what are our chances?
100%.
We had gotten domain admin by like 10 a.m. on Monday. And we found like 6 or 7 other methods to get domain. And I had to tell him, I'm like, I got to be honest. If you haven't already been compromised by China, they're not trying. Like, I don't know. There's no,
why they don't like you.
Yeah.
And now a word from our sponsor, Edgewise Networks. The biggest problem in security that remains unsolved are flat networks in cloud and data centers, with unprotected attack paths that allow threats to move laterally to cause data breaches. But microsegmentation using network addresses is complicated and takes too much time. But there's a better approach. Edgewise Zero Trust Auto Segmentation. Edgewise is impossibly simple microsegmentation, delivering results immediately with a security outcome that's provable. At the core of Edgewise Auto Segmentation is Zero Trust Identity, which allows workloads to communicate only after their software identity has been verified. Malicious or unimproved software is no longer allowed to communicate. Identity-based protection provides more coverage with fewer policies to make Edgewise simple to deploy and manage. No changes to the application or network are required. One solution protects virtual machines and containers in the cloud and on-premises. To stop lateral threat movement and prevent breaches, visit edgewise.net for a demo and to see results within minutes. So let's talk about tools. So from an attacker perspective, obviously, we've always had the not really debate, but we've talked about how attackers use the same tools as pen testers and vice versa, right? And we won't go into that area. But how do attackers set up the attack? Obviously they're not using their personal email to send these out. Can you talk a little bit about the tools to do these types of targeted attacks?
Sure. Yeah. So and to be completely honest, it's gotten harder. 5, 6, 7 years ago, it was much easier. You could just basically create a Gmail address and send stuff out, or whatever. With G Suite and with people moving to Office 365, and then all of the content filtering, and there's just so many security controls in place. It's getting significantly more harder. But look at any company's email, and you'll see spam getting through. You'll see phishing stuff getting through. So for the actual attacker, they're able to send stuff out to 1 million people, and if they get 1% through, great. If 0.5% of that actually click the link and become victims, that's still a huge win for them. It's harder as a pen tester to do simulations. We have to be a little more cooperative with the client. But there are times where I'll just spin up an EC2 instance in Amazon, so it's completely new, and send it from there. Connect to Gmail or something like that. There are other tools that make it easier to do stuff on a large scale. We use GoFish internally. Jordan Wright he's a great guy. I'm one of the founders of B-Sides Oklahoma, and Jordan was our keynote this year. It's a great keynote. It's up on YouTube if you want to go check it out. But Jordan created this. No bias. I'm completely biased. No, he's really nice guy. He has completely created this open source project called GoFish. And I know there's commercial stuff out there, and there's other companies that do this. And there's a lot of value to companies that do it for you and make it easy. But as a pen tester, somebody that is like, I just need a tool to do this quickly and effectively. GoFish works really well. I can show that to you if you've got, if we've got a few minutes.
That'd be great.
Yeah, go ahead.
So anyways, this you see a pretty fancy dashboard here, and you can see all the different emails that have been sent and opened over time. But here's what's really cool about this tool. So I can go in here and I can create an email template. And we've got a bunch of templates set up, and we use code names for all of our customers. So for instance, I just realized this one here, Ghost, that's an actual customer. We have a customer whose code name is Ghost. So we set something up for them, but anywhere that we use their name in a tool like that, we always use a code name so that, we don't have to worry about somebody seeing it.
And when you see actual company names there, like ADP, Amazon,
That means they're not a.
that's not
Yeah.
real. That-
Yeah,
just-
Yeah, nice catch.
exactly.
Yeah.
So
So I wanted to point it out because we
Fair
have
enough.
had people contact us after we do webcasts and things like that, where they'll say, "Hey, man, you revealed a customer name," and I'm like, "Oh my god, no way, really? That is a feature of ours."
Yeah.
So yeah, sorry.
yeah. So looking at like, let's talk about the ADP one, right? So if you open it up here, you can see the template, and you can basically you create a template, you give it a name, the subject, and you can do an HTML version and a text version. You've got variables for the first name, last name, any information that you want to submit. You can add variables in there. You can put a tracking image, and that just adds a little 1 pixel by 1 pixel image so that when they click the link, it actually you can see whether or not they opened it. You can see whether they opened the email, and then also track whether they click the link, and then you can add files and all this kind of stuff. So like that's an example of one. I don't remember what this Dropbox one is. Let's see what that looks like. Oh, hi, a new web browser just signed into your Dropbox account. To keep your account secure, let us know if this is you, etc. My favorite are the ones like, let's see if there's one from Outlook.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, it's like which ones do you get the biggest bang for your buck?
Yeah, so I usually, for a pen test, I like to go after things that, like I said, somebody's going to give me credentials. So like, for instance, this Outlook one, your company has turned on 2-step login verification for your email account. Please log into your account to complete the setup or verify your information. And so especially if we can tie that to existing technologies we already know they're using, something that they're already, I mentioned urgency and emotion earlier.
Yeah.
Two of the things I like to generate are urgency and emotion, but also familiarity. If I can use familiarity, people just, it bypasses that part of their brain and they just click without thinking about it. So, different templates like there, we've got some for, there's the one that look like Outlook or the Office 365 version or stuff like that. We've created a lot of different templates. And then the next page, okay, so they get the email, then you want to set up a landing page. And so there's a section for landing pages. When we come over here, and so like the ADP one, let's see what that looks like. Not the source. I don't think I can make that name. Oh, cool. Yeah, so it just says your request has been submitted. Please allow 48 hours for a response. So I'm setting the context of like, hey, wait, I'm not sure that did what I wanted it to. The user thinks maybe there's something fishy here. Well, it tells me to wait 48 hours. Maybe I'll wait. So anything like that. A lot of times, like if it's a login prompt, what I'll do is I will have it grab those credentials and then just redirect them back to the actual login prompt. So then if they're like, wait a minute, was this a phishing attack? Did I just get phished? They look up in the URL and they see it's their login. Like, they check it out. Okay, well, no, this is the legit place. And they totally missed that they didn't check it out the first time. So there's
That it doesn't take them anywhere once
Exactly.
they log in.
Yeah. Well, but no, so that's the thing. Like the first time it doesn't take them anywhere, but the second time it redirected them to the actual page. So if they log in that time, then it works again.
Yeah, but the whole point of them clicking was to verify something or set up two-factor authentication.
Oh, yeah,
They
then
finally
it doesn't
get
set it
there,
up.
and it's like, what was I here for?
Yeah, exactly.
I can't remember.
What am I doing? Yeah, a lot of times I'll throw up an error. I'll just have it have an error page that says, like, unable to connect. Please try again later. Too many concurrent users. Please try again later. Something like that. So like there's one here for Palo Alto, right? Like, so if I know a customer has Palo Alto devices, and if I'm going after network admins that I think might have access to that, I will use something like that. It's all about just figuring out what they have and then directing them that way. So then, okay, so we've got the email template we've got set up. We've got the landing pages. And then the next thing is basically you create a user group. You create groups of users. And so in here, I just come in here and I say new group. I give it a name and I can bulk import. I can just upload a CSV file of my users and give them whatever variables I want. I can add, different types of data. If I'm going to use something in the email, I can add it in as part of the CSV. And then once I've done, I just go create a new campaign. And the campaigns are pretty straightforward. I say that, I click here, and now it's not loading. There it goes. So I give it a name. I select the template that I created. I select the landing page I created, whatever URL that landing page is going to be on, where they're going to go. Like what I want them to see, and then I schedule it, and that's it. I hit launch, and it does all its magic. And then I come over here, and I watch I watch the stuff come through. And so I can scroll down and I can look at each campaign and I can see things like how many people opened the email, how many people received it, how many people opened it, how many people clicked the link, how many people provided credentials, stuff like that. So this is a really simple tool. And for some things it works really well. But like I said, for others, for certain types of jobs, I still go back and like to manually do it. I like to set up the email server myself and set up the DKIM and the SPF records and like get everything set up so it looks like a legitimate site. And that's harder. That takes a lot more time. You talked about the Twitter thing earlier. Yeah, that takes a lot of build up to get there.
Yeah, and there are tools that you can use too. Like I'm thinking like the social engineering toolkit set, right? Dave Kennedy's tool that will actually set up the fake site and actually plug in the Metasploit and launch an exploit and those things too.
So funny story. I've never asked Dave about this. I've always wondered where he got the idea for the social engineering toolkit, and the reason is this was like 2006, 2007, 2008, somewhere in there. I remember I asked on the SANS advisory mailing list and on it was paul.com back then, like, hey, what are people using for phishing? Like, how are people doing this? There's got to be a tool out here. There's got to be some simple way. I've got this idea, like, what if we did this and this and this? And I never did anything with it. And like 2 months later, Dave introduced SET. And I'm always like, I mean, part of me, I want to take some credit for at least inspiring that. Like I was never going to do it, but I've always meant to ask him about that. But yeah, it's a fantastic tool to simplify this stuff.
Yeah, exactly. So one question I have is, so when you're launching these, especially, against an organization, how often do you run into problems with like, emails getting blocked and spam filters and other things like that? Like, and what do you do when you have to, like, you're in the middle of an engagement and all of a sudden you're realizing none of my fishes are going out or you're not getting any clicks because maybe you've got a problem? Like, what do you do in those instances?
Honestly, we don't do a lot of phishing as part of tests anymore unless it's coordinated with the organization.
Okay.
So we talk to them about what controls do they have in place, how are they preventing these types of attacks already, what types of things do they know work. Like if they are doing regular phishing tests against their own people, or if they're doing certain types of training, it doesn't make sense for me to duplicate the effort they've already done. But it might, if they're, hey, we're training people not to do this thing. Okay, well, maybe we craft an email to do that thing and see how they respond, right? Phishing, pen testing in general. I always like to say pen testing is an educational opportunity. It's a way to teach your people what an attack looks like, how their systems respond, how your controls, block certain things.
Yep.
There's so much value you can learn as opposed to just checking the box and slapping somebody on the wrist for messing up. So with phishing, I like to say, okay, what are we specifically testing? How are we doing that? And then let's come up with an actual ruse that might work and that will bypass your controls. And sometimes that means whitelisting the address in the control, because if our goal is user awareness, or if our goal is testing to see if people click, and I spend 3 days setting up a ruse and it doesn't get past your spam filter, you just wasted all that money and got nothing out of it.
Yeah.
So
actually, I was going to say that raises a really interesting point. Is like, to do phishing assessments properly, you really need somebody who specializes in it, because you come across all these weird little things. I discovered when I was doing it for a government department here in Canada that they actually, their firewalls are all controlled by a central other department, right? And so you can't just say, can you please whitelist this email address or IP address? They say, well, for how long? Well, we're going to be doing it for a year. No, you need to tell me what day, what time. And even then, you'd have to run a test on 10 people and it would pass. And then you'd send out 10,000 and 500 of them wouldn't get through for some reason, so it's really hard to do.
Yeah. And that's part of that mentality that, well, you're the pen tester. We're not going to share any information with you. Like, you should be trying to see if you can get in. And I mean, that's kind of an old school mindset. I mean, I don't like the name purple teaming, but I like that mentality of, it goes with the educational opportunity thing, combining red team and blue team in an effort to test our controls, see how they work, and figure out how to make ourselves better.
And I think the big difference with a pen tester and a real attacker is a real attacker has unlimited time, resources, money, especially if they're a nation state. They're probably going to do some testing right? They're going to either test an organization through various techniques to see if emails get through, or they're going to do, they're going to take their time and really spend the time to target like an individual and get it right. And of course, burn maybe a 0 day on an individual. It's possible.
Yeah, when you have unlimited resources, you can take, you can do whatever you want. Or maybe it's not even that. Maybe I don't have the resources of a nation state, but maybe I have the ability to send out attacks to 500 organizations, and the 2 that respond, then I target them to follow up.
Yeah.
Right. That's the type of stuff we can't do in a 1 or 2 week pen testing engagement. Even if you give me 3 months, like it's just, there's a lot of effort built into there. So yeah. The one of the examples that I thought of, and I don't remember who said what, but it made me think of it. We did some testing of it was a university, and they had never done phishing before. They wanted us to do it, but they were kind of concerned. They weren't sure. So we did a limited, we targeted just their IT folks. There was about, I want to say it was around 70 IT people. And this was right after Trump had just been elected. So it was like January, February time. Yeah. And everybody, if you remember back then, everybody was worried about healthcare benefits and what was going to happen with Obamacare and all of this. So we created a ruse where we created an Excel file, and we had macros enabled. And the ruse was supposedly from the HR benefits person. And we said, hey, unfortunately, due to the changes in Washington, we have to change our benefits this year. And we've really tried to minimize the impact, but some people are going to lose some benefits, and some people's benefits, the costs are going to go up a little bit. We've created this document, the spreadsheet, to give you an idea of where you fall in that. Please, please, please don't share this outside the organization. There's a lot of political stuff and whatnot. And so we sent that email, and inside the email, it comes up. I literally just mashed on the keyboard for a few minutes and then copied and pasted that 1,000 times. And the very top line in bright yellow said, this email is only for members of this organization. If you're not a member of this organization, please, notify the person that sent it to you and delete it. And then the second line said, this email has been encrypted to protect the data. To decrypt the email, or to decrypt the information, please click the yellow enable macros button at the top. And I think the IT people who had been trained and were supposed to know better, I think we had like 95% click that email. and like the 5% were like people that weren't there that day or something. Wow. But even their user awareness training person clicked the email because, we generated urgency. Hey, this is a big deal. This is going to affect me. We generated emotion. Who's taking my benefits? And then familiarity, because we used a format and a signature line that looked just like their HR person normally would send out. And it was incredibly successful.
Cool. I have a question more along the lines of the back end as you start the exploits. So, let's assume that you can get something that actually is effective, in trying to take advantage of a vulnerability in some software at the client or at the target. I've asked Tom this before many years ago about, what does it look like to a user when their, remote code execution starts to happen? Is it detectable at all? Or are there clues that, people should be taught about to recognize?
Man, that's a good question. So I always like to teach people to be suspicious. When something doesn't look right, it should fire some notification. There's this thing called the critical faculty. I'm gonna chase a squirrel and come back around if that's all right. The critical faculty, and I'm probably gonna get this wrong, and some psychology person will write in and tell you that I'm an idiot. But this thing called the critical faculty in your brain basically says, you know what? There's too much input. I can't keep track of everything. So all of the stuff that's normal every day, I'm gonna tune that out. Like right now, my mind is accepting input from all over my room, but it tunes out 99% of that because I don't need that. But if something falls off the shelf over here, immediately I'm attuned to it. And that's what the critical faculty does. It allows us to tune out the stuff we don't care about and to focus on the stuff we do care about. And so what I try to do as an attacker is try to generate an email that is so normal to you that you don't notice the weird stuff if there's anything unusual about it. So that's what we have to do a better job of teaching people, is to look for the unusual stuff. That domain is slightly wrong. They used a phrasing here that's, I don't know that a normal person would use phrasing like that. They're asking me to take some action that I wouldn't normally take. So once you have a little bit of suspicion there, that makes it more likely to notice, you know what, I did this thing and now I went to log into my account and it said my password had changed, or, you know, stuff like that. Look for weird errors, you know, especially if you try to log into something, you get an email. I log into my Gmail all the time, never have a problem. I get an email, I click a link, I try to log in, and it gives me a weird error. That's unusual. Like those two things should tell me, wait, what just happened? I need to forward this to somebody else, to someone in IT, and say, hey, is this a problem? Did I click something?
Yeah.
I used to, you know, you got malware running on the machine, and you got stuff. You could see that the processor was, you know, bumped up to 100%, and there's stuff going on. Nowadays, computers are so powerful, like you don't hardly even see that.
Yeah, I think the last time I asked Tom about it, it was kind of like, well, your browser might pop up, look like it's loading, and then die, right, or go away.
Possibly,
right?
yeah.
Or it might hang or something like that. I assume stuff like that is still probably going to happen, or maybe it happens. Maybe something happens under the covers.
It totally depends on the actual exploit. You know, like in the past, we've used things like PowerShell, Empire, and different command and control tools. So literally, like whatever I get you to run is going to spawn off something else and go do its own thing. The question is, what do I do with that tool? So that the HR benefits email is a great example, right? I got the people to enable macros that ran my stuff in the background. In fact, I think that was PowerShell Empire, if I remember. The problem is, what do I do with them now? Right? They're expecting this spreadsheet to show them data to decrypt. And so what we did instead was we just popped up an error message saying unable to connect, please try again later.
Plausible deniability. Yeah.
Exactly, right? Just all we want to do is push them on just a little bit further and let them try again. I will say with that one, we had one dude that tried to open it. He sent it to his personal machine. He sent it to his wife at work. And then he opened it up. Like I think like this one guy opened it up on like 5 different machines. And because he really, really wanted to see those benefit changes.
Yeah, actually, that reminds me of another funny story, because it's going way back to the phishing assessments problem again. Had a client that had sent out, you know, something about free pizza, or, you know, it's the classic, and people clicking on it. And then, of course, they had a few people click on it, even though they'd had some training. They didn't expect a lot. There were some. So they would go and do in-person briefings to the people that clicked and tell them, you know, okay, this was, you know, a test, and, you know, you shouldn't have clicked on it. Here's what you should be looking for, etc. And the person's first response was, yeah, but do I still get the free pizza?
Right. You know what? Offering, like, if you fill out this survey, you get a free Amazon gift card, you know, $10. People will do an amazing amount of stuff for $20 on Amazon. It's crazy. And I like to gamify that on the defensive side. So if you can do things to reward people for reporting phishing attacks, if you can do things to reward them for doing the right thing, dude, what are they going to do? They're going to go tell everybody else in their cubicle, hey, this is a big deal. Look what I just got. And then everybody's going to want to participate. Now you got to find the balance there, right? But use that if you can.
Yeah. That sounds like a great idea for a gamified security.
Maybe we should gamify some of this stuff. Yeah.
Gamify, yeah. Is there anybody that does that?
Yeah, we'll have to look it up. I'm sure
I've got one client that every year they fly in people from around the company. You know, international company, they've got people all over. They fly, I think, like 10 or 12 people into one location. And usually there's representatives from the like sysadmin team, representatives from the dev team, representatives from the network team, and other different organizations. And they bring them in and they do user awareness training and they teach people different things, whatnot. And it's a big deal. Like, hey, you get to go somewhere and be part of this year. And you get to stay in a hotel and your expenses are all paid and they're bringing in nice food and it's a catered thing. Like that, they're just using a portion of their security budget to really, what they're doing is they're raising champions in each of those divisions. They're raising a champion for security that's then going to go back and tell other people. And I think at one year, I don't know if they still do this, but like they were having challenge coins made. So if you got the challenge coin for that year, like that's you know what I mean? That's something you take home and you brag about, you put on your desk.
Cool.
I like things like that.
I have a question for you. Like, so I've heard the term security champion in a few different client organizations. Is it a sort of commonly known, defined thing? Does somebody coin the term security champion, or
I have no idea. I'm sure I didn't come up with it. I'm sure I've heard it from. Do you know, Tom?
Yeah, actually, that's part of like kind of a DevOps, approach for application security. I know at Veracode we talk about security champions all the time. Is developers have to have that single point of contact for security, and spread, like you said, Nathan, spread that awareness of secure coding or whatever it is related to the security of the application to the other developers. So that's something I know we promote at Veracode is, ensuring you have a security champion. That security champion is trained, and then they teach the rest of the developers, how to secure the
Okay.
code.
So
Or
what you're
they're the
saying is
main-
I can't trademark the term.
Unfortunately,
No,
no.
that is-
No.
And my history is horrible, but if you go back to like the Middle East a few thousand years ago, you've got different people conquering different people, and some nations or empires would come in and say, you know what, we're just going to wipe out everybody and replace it with our own religion and our own source of government and our own stuff. And then you've got others, and I wish I should have looked this up. I wish I could remember what I'm talking about. There were a couple that come in and said, you know what, you keep doing your thing. We're going to put a level of management above you, and then we're going to bring some of your people into our management and incorporate that. And I mean, the Romans did this, right? Like in Bible times, if you look at the New Testament, you've got the Romans basically said, you know what, Jews, you kind of keep doing your thing. We're going to put this guy above and kind of manage the government side, but you manage the religion side. Let's merge our cultural stuff together. And that worked out really, really well. I think it's the same thing, right? If you've got organizations where it's security's over here and the rest of IT's over here and they're just butting heads, that doesn't work for anybody. But as you can kind of, somebody's got to be the top, but if you can kind of build the teams together and yeah, that's good stuff.
Cool.
Awesome.
Well, that's fun.
Yeah. So Nathan, where can our listeners find out more about you? And of course, Secure Ideas. I think we always plug your company, but
sure. Yeah. Well, securideas.com is the best place to get more information about there. One of the things I'm really proud of in the last year or so, we've always taken education seriously, and we've done a lot of training. We've put a lot into that. But for the last year or so, we've started building out a knowledge center on our website. So if you have questions about, how do you differentiate a pen test from a vulnerability scan? What makes one customer, what makes one product better than another? How much do you charge for a pen test? I mean, all the different types of questions there. We've tried to build out this knowledge center just to be a resource for the community. So I'm really proud about that.
Awesome.
For me personally, I'm the only Nathan Sweaney in the world. So if you can spell it right, you can Google me.
That's easy.
Yeah, good or bad, my privacy is pretty much gone. A friend pointed out the other day, he's like, if you Google Nathan Sweaney cell phone, your cell phone number is like the third Google result. I'm like, oh, great. And now I've just told your listeners, I don't know what your audience is, but
our million users. Yes.
Million users. Yeah. So yeah, I'm easy to find. I'm at Sweaney on Twitter. I've got a great story about how I didn't steal it. I confiscated that from a neo-Nazi, that handle.
Are you serious?
Ooh.
Yeah. So
Okay, you have to tell that story.
real quick, the simplified
quick.
version, it was abandoned. And so I was real hesitant about, like, I don't want to just take this, right? But it was abandoned, and I waited and waited for years, and I kept messaging the guy, and nobody would ever respond. And finally, one day, for whatever reason, I clicked forgot password. And Twitter says, do you want to send the forgot password to ... at, blah, 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 blah.com. Well,
Twitter vulnerability. Yeah.
it gave like the first two letters and the last two letters. This guy had a domain name, some Aryan website in his profile, and the domain matched. I couldn't tell for sure because a lot of it would start out. But so I just went to check and see, and that domain hadn't been registered for like 3 years. And so it had only been used for spam up till that point, and it was all, racist, Aryan stuff, whatnot. So I basically went and registered the domain, and I posted something on the domain for like 30 days. Actually, I think I left it for like 90 days. I said, hey, if this is yours, if you want it back, my intent is to take this Twitter account, but I'm not sure the ethics here and the morality and all this stuff. So I'm going to give you lots of opportunity to let me know. And I waited and waited and waited. And after 3 months, I went and then I did the forgot password. And sure enough, it sent me an email. And so I took over the account. And then I didn't even use the Twitter account for a while. I put it like for another month or two and said, hey, I just took this over. If I put it in I tweeted it. If you want this back, contact me. I'll work with you. And nobody ever responded. And then so
that sounds like a really Canadian approach to taking over an account.
Nice way of doing it.
Another plug for Secure Ideas. We take ethics very seriously. We use the tagline "professionally evil," but ethics is one of those things that we feel very strongly about. And so yeah, I wanted to make sure I did it the right way, but it makes for a great story.
That's great.
And now Kevin likes to point out that now I have a Aryan neo-Nazi domain that's registered under my Google account. So
of course he does.
Can't win.
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Nathan, for joining us for this episode. Really appreciate the demo, your insights. It's been great. And for our listeners, of course, stay tuned for our next monthly show, which is going to go into the exploit, which will be pretty cool. So we'll have another special guest, someone more on the forensic side, to talk about what happens, after you click on that exploit, and we'll talk about remediation and ransomware and all that fun stuff. So
Insurance,
yes, sure.
Backups.
Maybe that's our fourth
Backups.
episode.
All that cool stuff. So again, Nathan, thank you. Scott, thank you as always, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks a lot, guys.
Talk to you later.